Well, I got the RAM in here on the rack, just kind of doing a visual and stuff, trying to get a game plan together on it. And I honestly don't know if I'm going to have a part two to this or not because I don't honestly think I want to get into it. Um, it's not that it's a diesel. I mean, the reason why I don't want to get into it is because it's a diesel, but not really why you think. Um, with diesels, they tend to just pack a lot of stuff in places you just can't get to. So if you remember on the pre-scan, immediately we would have a code set back for the particulate filter differential pressure sensor circuit A. Um, just to get to that, it looks like the DPF has got to come out. If you see the two rubber hoses here, those go to the sensor, which is up on top of the transmission there. So not really something easy to get to. Secondly, I drove it because the guy said when you drive it, this thing will act up pretty easily. When I drove it, we set a lot more codes. I think a total of 9 codes so far, ranging from fuel pressure issues to the swirl valves on the intake manifold, and then of course this sensor here. And just doing this visual inspection, there's a pretty substantial oil leak on this side of the engine. I feel like it's the oil cooler up there. And then there's also, that's coolant, and it is coming from the front of the motor, whatever is right here. I'm guessing that's a water pump. I'm not real sure, but that right there is causing some leakage. So this thing's got oil leak, coolant leak that needs to be fixed, and I still don't know what the fuel pressure issue is. You can drive it just fine some. It is a hard start, like watching live data while you're trying to crank over. It takes it a little bit to build pressure. It'll finally build pressure and bust off and run, but driving down the road, sometimes pressure is good. Here's a screenshot of it while I was driving. Pressure will be fine, and then all of a sudden you give it some throttle, pressure just drops, and then you let off of it, it can kind of catch itself back up, and then it might be good again. It's just a strange issue. And I'm not really familiar with diesels, especially this diesel, a 3-liter Eco diesel in this truck. The pump is right on front of the motor. It's easy to get to. The fuel pressure regulator on the rail, I think it's the regulator on the rail, is easy to get to. There's a couple things fuel pressure wise that I can get to, but I'm gonna lean towards this thing. It's gonna need some mechanical stuff taken apart, and it's just a lot of stuff I don't want to get into. So I'm gonna talk with the customer, just kind of see where he wants to go with it. Had a little conversation with the customer on this thing, and he's okay with the oil leak, the coolant leak, the pressure sensor code, the swirl valve code. He's okay with all that. He said if I can just check the fuel pressure and figure out what's wrong with the fuel pressure so the truck can at least stay running, he'll be happy, and he'll take it somewhere else to get all the other stuff looked at and fixed. He just needs it to run good enough to drive it somewhere. So it's like, okay, I'll do a little bit of checking with it and basically kind of the way the system on this works is there's a lift pump in the tank that brings fuel to the high pressure pump. And the high pressure pump is actually right here on the front of the motor. It's pretty easy to get to. It's just got a cover here you can take off, and the pump's there. I don't know what's involved with taking it off. I know it's gear driven, according to what SI says. But we've got a fuel feed and a return line, which is convenient right here on the top of the engine. And it's even marked directional. So we got fuel that comes in this side and then returns on this side. And these other lines are right here. One of these is going to be the bleed off from the injectors, and the other, I probably assume is this one, is going to be the bleed off from the regulator. So I just want to know, do we got good supply? So I've got my fuel gauge just teed in here, and we're going to just wake this thing up to where it primes. We want to see what kind of pressure we get on the gauge, and see if we can figure out what's going on with this thing. See if we've just got like a low pressure pump issue where it's not actually supplying pressure to the high pressure pump, or supplying volume, I guess, to the high pressure pump. And yeah, then it's starving it. So let's get in here, wake this thing up, and see if we can get this gauge somewhere. I think if I just open the door, it will wake up. Okay, nothing there. So let's get in here and actually turn the key on. Okay. Okay, so we get some pressure, but I can already tell you that is low. This spec on this is actually 65 pounds. And that pump sounds horrible. Can you guys hear that? Oh, it's just shut off. So, yeah, not looking good for that pump. And we're already bleeding off pretty fast. Let me wake this thing up again. I'm gonna flush the air out of my lines just to make sure the trapped air isn't causing an issue. This may be a little more simple than I was anticipating. I'm gonna see if you guys see what I see. So let me key this off and back on to where the pump turns on. And let's press this. Can y'all see that? Running clean now. Every now and then there's a spit of air. See? Right there. I'm just holding the valve open, so it's just purely dumping it. But there's a lot of air in that. I mean, look at all the air. I think there's just something wrong with this pump where it's sucking a lot of air. So, sometimes it's something easy. So, pretty confident with that to say, hey, you need to drop the tank, figure out why this pump is sucking air, and this thing might be good to drive again. So, okay, that's it on this one. Thanks for watching, everybody. Well, customer got the truck over to another shop that I work at and pulled the tank out of it. And what did we find? the pump has started rusting a lot, and there was just a ton of rust down in there. So I'm thinking maybe the bottom of that screen was getting clogged up, and it was actually having to pick up high, or maybe where there wasn't fuel or something causing it to get aerated or something. But either way, we got a new pump. Gonna change the fuel filter in this thing also, get it back in here. There's just a tiny bit of rust in the bottom of the tank, not very much at all. So I'll try to get in there with a magnet and get those little pieces out, and we'll see what happens after we get this back in here. Okay, got the pump back in here, got the tank put back in, everything. I did crank it one time just to kind of help get the air primed out of everything, and it's been sitting here for a little bit while I cleaned up. So what do you think? Do you think it's going to be a long crank again, or do you think this thing's going to heat the glow plugs and then fire right up? Let's see. Still a long crank. Still kind of a long crank there. Could still have some air in it. But what I want to do is get the scan tool connected back to it and take this thing for a drive, see if it still is dropping fuel pressure or not. I was skeptical there was going to be more issues. I think there's going to be a regulator issue, but I gotta get this thing backed out and close and lock their shop back up before I take it for a drive. So we'll see. We'll come back when I'm driving it. Okay, got the scan tool recording. So let's get this thing on the road, see what happens, and hope it doesn't leave me stranded. Let's see if I can set this up somewhere I can see you. There we go. Now, last time I drove this thing, and I thought I was going to have to call a tow truck, was every now and then it would be fine, and then it would spaz out and build no pressure, especially under a lot of throttle. So let's see if that happens again. So far everything's looking good, just cruising, but let's give it some throttle. Bunch of little gnats in here. So far looking okay. Well, let's drive it a little bit, and if something happens, I'll bring you guys back. Well, I've been driving in about, it's like 6 minutes now, roughly. And so far, it's been driving perfectly fine. Let me roll this window back up. Hasn't acted up at all. Fuel pressure's been matching perfect. And before, when I was getting it out of my shop so they could bring it over here on a rollback, I could barely get it out of my shop because it went dead twice with me, just backing it out of my shop. So it's not a temperature thing, because it was cold whenever I was backing it out of my shop, and we're already up to temperature. Coolant temp is 204 there. So definitely seems a lot better as far as driving. I'll give you a good pull here. So yeah, full throttle, no issues, and as you can see on the fuel pressure, it matched perfect. So I definitely think we've fixed the fuel pressure issue. Still not sure about the hard start thing because it did take it just a little bit to crank. But I mean, I barely started it, got it to run just for a couple seconds and shut it off when I first primed it. So it's possible it still had some air in there, and maybe by now we have worked all that air out. So I'll get back to their shop, park it, let it sit. I've got another thing to check, and we'll see how it starts in a little bit. So I got back to the shop and just wanted to do a code scan, and we still have this oxygen sensor pump cell current circuit open. This particular filter pressure sensor A circuit high, and these two, if I remember right when I looked those up, they're something to do with the intake runner, the swirl valve. So still got some issues there that need to be worked out, but it drove perfectly fine. So now to just let it sit here for a little while and see how well it starts back. All right, let's see how it does. Hey, that is awesome. It fired right back up. That's what I want to see. So it wasn't as bad as I was expecting it would be, but so far blown fuses for no power steering, and I don't know if I mentioned it, I can't remember. The second fuse that was blown was actually to the cooling fan, and in my original report I did have a cooling fan circuit fault. So fixed two problems there. One he didn't even realize he had, and then the hard start, lack of power while driving, even stalling, all of that was a lift pump that had basically rotten apart, started rusting away. So there's some interesting issues with this truck. It's apparently had a neglected life, I think. So I don't know if the current owner will have me do anything else with it or not. It does still have the check engine light on right there. So I don't really know if he wants to invest any more time in the diag stuff or not, because the other things that's going on with the pressure sensor, the DPF, that's hard to get to, and the intake manifold runner issue, that's kind of hard to get to as well. So there'll definitely be some disassembly that needs to be done for that. And then you also got those oil leaks, the coolant leak. So we'll see. That's probably going to wrap it up for me with this one, unless he wants to pay somebody to take stuff apart so I can check it. And if he does, I'll bring you back for another part. But until then, we'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching.